The case for the ontology of money as credit. Money as bearer or basis of value. By Phil Armstrong and Kalim Siddiqui. The superiority of state and credit theories. Quote, money was invented as a social and governmental phenomenon, not as a means of reducing transactions costs in markets. The invention of money probably predated the development of formal markets. Thus, money facilitated the rise of markets, rather than vice versa. End quote. Goodhart, 1998. The argument that money's origins are found in the social relationships embedded within communities, which allow states to provision themselves and for credit transactions to become widespread, is much more convincing than the argument that its exegesis can be found in commodity exchange, whether this be the neoclassical or Marxist version of the story. Commodity theory typically entails the logical derivation of money as a universal equivalent, resulting from the development of commodity exchange, and often where foreignness is significant, such as in intercommunity extent, allowing spot transactions to take place. This is followed by the claim, implicit or explicit, that once established, this universal equivalent forms the basis of the monetization of society. However, this conflates the introduction of a precious metal, universal equivalent, into international trade with the origins of money itself. Such thinking is not new, and certainly predates Marx, being apparent in the writings of John Locke, 1695. Quote, Locke offered a cohesive definition of money, one that broke with tradition. According to Locke, money was the same as traders' silver, the commodity that traveled in international exchange. This traditional view was that coined money was given extrinsic value by sovereign authority, produced for public as well as private ends, and intended to nurture a domestic community. End quote. Desson, 2014. Desson notes how Locke believed that the intrinsic value of precious metal, in this case silver, allowed it to act as a universal instrument in exchange. In fact, Locke defined money as a commodity with intrinsic metallic value, engendered as a medium by the consensus of traders for their use in international exchange. Desson, 2014. Desson observes that Locke considered that, quote, silver worked as money because it offered intrinsic value. That value attached by the common consent of those using silver as an instrument of the universal barter or exchange. Desson, 2014, quoting Locke, 1695. Desson also points to the following statement made by Locke, quote, I have spoken of silver coin alone because that makes the money of account and measure of trade all through the world, end quote. Desson, 2014, quoting Locke, 1695, and argues following Lowndes, 1695, quote, foreign trade ran at par when the currencies of each country traded for each other in the amount that reflected the quantity of silver they contained, end quote. Desson, 2014. However, it is significant that, quote, the reason coins traveled across foreign borders, according to their silver content, was that in precisely that circumstance, they were not money. Money was a domestic affair, a political project based on the institutions of minting, spending, taxing, adjudicating, and enforcing that make it work as way to count value, settle debts, and circulate value at home. Stripped of that infrastructure, outside of the engineering that made it circulate as money, coin was, in fact, bullion. European polities had long settled accounts in silver or gold, given the value those metals held for making money within their bounds. By conflating the shared content of money's bullion with the domestic measure itself, it was not hard to do. After all, silver and gold did move between countries as a means of lubricating trade. That point of reference was enormously attractive, especially for those unfamiliar with the way communities engineered money internally. Desan, 2014. This attraction exerted a powerful influence on Locke. Quote, as he summarized his argument for defining money, it was silver that mankind had agreed to give and give for all other commodities as an equivalent. Locke invoked a universal in order to set the standard for local practice. Locke did attend to the domestic situation, but he did so by extrapolating from his model, having described bullion but called it money. Locke then assimilated the latter to the former. Desan, 2014, quoting Locke, 1695. The similarities between Locke's approach and that expressed by Lapavitsas, 2003, are remarkable. In the same way as Locke and Marx before him, Lapavitsas explains the establishment of a universal commodity for use in international exchange, silver or gold, but then makes the same mistake as Locke by conflating this with money. Money does not derive from a universal equivalent which appears in international trade. Rather, money is a domestic invention, embedded in a particular society by forces generated within that society. In summary, we might contend that there is no proven link between intercommunity or international trade and the introduction of money into communities. Locke manifests this error, which is found in both neoclassical economics and Marxism. Instead, we would argue that it is state and credit theories which provide much more powerful explanations of the development of money within communities, and, as we shall see below, receive significant support from the evidence. The origin of money should not be understood as some side effect of the development of intercommunity or international trade, but rather as a development which springs directly from the development of social relationships within communities. All money is credit, but not all credit is money. Ray, 2004. If a seller provides goods and services but is prepared to wait for payment, she is granting credit. If the credit she holds on the buyer becomes transferable and allows her to settle her own debts with others, it effectively becomes money. Money then is merely transferable debt. It is a fictitious commodity in a Polanyian sense. Footnote 18. Polanyi notes the nature of fictitious commodities. Quote, labor, land, and money are essential elements of industry. They must also be organized in markets. In fact, these markets form an absolutely vital part of the economic system. But labor, land, and money are obviously not commodities. The postulate that anything that is bought and sold must have been produced for sale is emphatically untrue in regard to them. In other words, according to the empirical definition of a commodity, they are not commodities. Labor is only another name for a human activity which goes with life itself, which in turn is not produced for sale, but for entirely different reasons. Nor can that activity be detached from the rest of life, be stored or mobilized. Land is another name for nature, which is not produced by man. Actual money, finally, is merely a token of purchasing power, which, as a rule, is not produced at all, but comes into being through the mechanism of banking or state finance. None of them is produced for sale. The commodity description of labor, land, and money is entirely fictitious. End quote. Polanyi, 1944. End footnote. It has no corporeal existence, and intrinsically has a zero cost of production. It is not a produced commodity. It is merely an entry on a ledger. We might even suggest that in a world where trust and memory were perfect, money could exist purely in spoken form. A seller could receive a spoken credit and could pass this on to her own creditors in settlement of her debts using only language. However, in the real world, where trust and memory are not perfect, monetary systems have utilized tokens or money things such as coins, tallies, or banknotes to symbolize the debt. A seller, rather than acquiring merely a spoken credit or even a book credit, receives a physical token to show that they hold credit on the debtor, the state, or on a private individual or institution. The tokens may at first glance appear to be money itself, but on reflection, it is clear they are only symbols indicating that the holder holds the debt of another agent. The nature of the tokens, as only symbols of money, can be illustrated by referring to Knapp. The state could demonetize one token and monetize another. The choice of token by different communities can have far-reaching consequences. This is especially true of commodity money. Historically, coins containing precious metal have become a common form of tokens. These coins are really metal discs monetized by the stamp of the issuer. Their nature as commodity money tokens results from being declared as acceptable in payment of taxes by the state. Knapp, 1924. From a modern standpoint, it might seem wasteful to manufacture tokens or money things from precious metals with high intrinsic value and multiple uses instead of something with zero or close to zero intrinsic value. Why use precious metal? As Minsky said, anyone can create money. The trick is getting it accepted. Minsky, 1986. We suggest that in a world of uncertainty about the future, issuing debt by using precious metal tokens would have had several advantages. First, it would raise the prestige of the issuer. Any state that can access gold or silver and use it to manufacture money tokens should be worthy of at least some respect. Second, the scarcity of precious metals would give the tokens a floor value. If the current monetary system broke down and the tokens were no longer acceptable in payment of taxes, then at least they would have some residual value. Third, this scarcity would add to the acceptability of the tokens from those who might fear that the possibility of irresponsible issues of tokens by the state in the future was a real threat and might lead, in turn, to a reduced value of their monetary wealth. Lack of availability of precious metal would constrain the state from such actions. Fourth, fraudsters would find it hard to find precious metal relative to, say, a common material, which would reduce, although not eliminate, the chance of counterfeiting. In principle, though, materials with little or no intrinsic value could have been, and indeed were, chosen as money tokens, notably Hazelwood tallies. Ray, 1998, Dassan, 2014. However, the common choice of precious metal tokens has been the source of a great deal of confusion, as category errors have proliferated in economics. Unfortunately, economists have committed an ontological error, or category error, when considering the actual nature of money, and have confused money things or signifiers, more generally tokens, which are producible commodities, with the money itself, which is not a produced commodity. Ingham, 2001. The evidence in support of state and credit theories is wide-ranging and comprehensive. The impressive work done by Ingham, 1996, 1999, 2000, 2001, 2004A, and 2004B, Ray, 1998, 2006, Grierson, 1977, and Goodhart, 1998-2009, amongst others, is important and, from our perspective, ultimately convincing. We have already referred to Ray et al. 2004, who provides a detailed analysis and critique of Innes's work and a wide-ranging survey of evidence concerning the development of money. In the case of Egypt, John Henry considers that, quote, Egypt was not a monetary economy. Production was not undertaken to make money, but it certainly had money, and money was not a medium of exchange, but a social relationship. It was bound up with the transition from egalitarian to class society. End quote. Henry, 2004. He continues in support of Innes's credit theory of money. Quote, A. Mitchell Innes, a theoretical account, developed nearly a century ago and long ignored by economists, is in accord with the historical facts of the development of money in Egypt. End quote. Henry, 2004. We might also consider the case of Mesopotamia. Hudson contends that in general, quote, the power to create money and expand the credit supply historically has tended to be in the hands of public bodies. Ever since its Bronze Age inception, money's power has been established by the public sector's willingness to accept it in payment for public fees and taxes. End quote. Hudson, 2004. Footnote 19. See also Goodhart and Hudson, 2018, for an analysis of Jubilee debt cancellations. Their work highlights further evidence in support of the argument that state power and authority are at the root of the development of money. End footnote. He goes on to conclude, in the specific case of ancient Mesopotamia, quote, rather than originating with private individuals trucking and bartering, money was created as a medium to denominate and pay obligations to the large public institutions. The Mesopotamian breakthrough lay in creating a system of price equivalencies that gave a sense of proportion. Footnote 20. As we have noted, Hudson, 2004, describes how the Mesopotamians created a bi-monetary price ratio, barley and silver, which enabled the relative value of products, land rents, trade and services, debt and its interest charges to be coordinated into a single overall value system. End footnote. The value dimension was provided by the accounting formalities that enabled temples and palaces to coordinate their internal resource flows and dealings with the rest of the economy. End quote. Hudson, 2004. Third, we might consider ancient Greece. According to Keynes, quote, the Solonic reform of the Athenian currency in the 6th century BC was an exercise in the charterless prerogative which was contemporary with, but in no way dependent upon, the existence of coined money. It was just a change of standard. End quote. Keynes, 1930. The evidence supports the contention that money is always credit and should be analyzed as a development from the credit-debt relationship, and that the state has a critical role in the introduction and use of money. Examination of ancient empires confirms this. Even today, states and would-be states are issuing or intending to issue their own currency. In 2014, ISIS announced plans to introduce its own currency. This, in a sense, is an affirmation of its view of itself as a state. Quote, ISIS said it would reinstate an ancient Islamic dinar currency using gold and silver coins. There is a modern form of the dinar still in use in some countries, but these use fewer precious metals for coins. ISIS's announcement did not state when the currency would come into circulation. End quote. The Independent, 13th of November, 2014.